Welcome to Emotions Unfolded, where every story carries a secret, every betrayal has a consequence, and sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one with the strongest truth. My husband laughed when I walked into court without a lawyer. He leaned toward his attorney and whispered, "She has no idea what she's doing." Then the judge looked at me, studied the file in my hands, and asked one question that made my husband's smile disappear. "Mrs. Carter, who exactly are you?" That was the moment they realized they had made one enormous mistake. My name is Claire Carter, and for 12 years I had been married to Daniel Carter. From the outside, our marriage looked perfect. We lived in a beautiful suburban house, had 2 cars in the driveway, and raised our 9-year-old daughter, Emma. Daniel had a successful career in corporate finance, and his family treated him like the golden child. I was simply his wife. At least that was what they believed. What they didn't know was that before I married Daniel, I had spent nearly a decade working in legal compliance and financial investigations for a federal agency. I had reviewed financial records, investigated fraudulent transactions, interviewed witnesses, and spent years learning how people hid the truth inside numbers. But Daniel never wanted his family to know the full extent of my career. At first, I thought he was protecting our privacy. Later, I realized he was protecting his image. "You don't need to talk about your old job," he'd tell me. "My family thinks you're intimidating." So I stopped talking about it. I became quieter. I focused on Emma. I managed our home. I supported Daniel. And slowly, his family began treating my silence as proof that I knew nothing. Then Daniel filed for divorce. He told everyone I was emotionally unstable. He claimed I had neglected Emma. He said my old career had made me controlling and difficult. Worst of all, he wanted primary custody of Emma and nearly everything we had built together. His parents immediately took his side. At the first hearing, Daniel arrived with 2 expensive attorneys. I arrived alone. As I walked into the courtroom, Daniel looked at me and smiled. His father leaned toward him. "She really came without a lawyer." Daniel laughed. "She probably thinks she can argue her way out of this." His attorney, Marcus Reed, looked through his papers and barely glanced at me. I sat quietly at my table. I wasn't nervous. I was waiting. Judge Helen Parker entered the courtroom, and everyone stood. After the formalities, she looked toward Daniel's side. Then she looked at me. "Mrs. Carter, are you represented by counsel?" "No, Your Honor." Daniel's smile widened. His attorney immediately began presenting his case. He described Daniel as stable, responsible, and financially secure. Then he described me as unpredictable. He presented my old work schedule as evidence that I had been unavailable as a mother. He mentioned business trips, late nights, emergency assignments. Every sacrifice I had made for my family was being twisted into proof that I was a bad mother. I listened, I took notes, and I said nothing. Then Marcus produced a financial statement showing Daniel had supposedly earned significantly more than me during our marriage. He claimed Daniel had personally contributed most of the money toward our house. The judge examined the document. Then she turned to me. "Mrs. Carter, do you dispute these figures?" I slowly stood. "Yes, Your Honor." Marcus smiled. "With respect, Mrs. Carter has no financial expertise." That was when I opened the black folder sitting in front of me. I looked directly at the judge. "Actually, Your Honor, I have considerable experience in financial investigations." The courtroom became quiet. Daniel stopped smiling. Judge Parker leaned forward. "What kind of experience?" I took a breath. My previous position involved investigating financial fraud, hidden assets, and corporate misconduct. Daniel's face changed instantly because he knew something his attorney didn't. I hadn't spent the last 3 weeks preparing for this hearing. I'd spent the last 11 years learning exactly how Daniel thought. Daniel's expression changed the moment I mentioned financial investigations. He knew there was more to my past than I had ever discussed with his family, but he still didn't understand how much I had noticed during our marriage. Judge Parker looked at me carefully. "Mrs. Carter, do you have documentation supporting your objection?" "Yes, Your Honor." I placed 3 documents on the table. Marcus Reed immediately stood. "Your Honor, I object to the introduction of documents that have not been properly reviewed by counsel. Judge Parker looked at him. She is representing herself, Mr. Reed. If you have a legal objection, state its basis. Marcus hesitated. I almost smiled. For the first time that afternoon, Daniel looked nervous. I handed the first document to the clerk. This is the original closing statement from our house purchase. Judge Parker examined it. You're saying this contradicts the financial statement submitted by Mr. Carter? Yes. How? I pointed to one section. Daniel claimed he contributed 70% of the down payment. The actual bank records show that $45,000 came from our joint investment account. Daniel shook his head. That account was funded mostly by me. I turned toward him. Then why did you transfer $28,000 from that same account into your brother's business 6 weeks before filing for divorce? The courtroom went silent. Daniel's attorney stood. Objection. Relevance. It is directly relevant to marital assets, I replied. Judge Parker nodded. Overruled. Daniel swallowed. I opened another folder. This is the transfer record. The judge reviewed it. Then she looked at Daniel. Mr. Carter, why was this transfer not disclosed? Daniel looked at Marcus. Marcus whispered something to him. Daniel finally answered. It was a temporary loan. Where is the loan agreement? Daniel paused. There wasn't a formal agreement. I heard someone in the gallery whisper. His father looked uncomfortable. I continued. That wasn't the only transfer. I placed another stack of papers on the table. During the previous year, money had moved from our joint accounts into 3 different accounts connected to Daniel's relatives. Small amounts, $8,000, $6,000, $9,000, never large enough to immediately attract attention. But together, they added up to more than $70,000. Marcus tried to stop me. These transactions are being mischaracterized. I looked at him. Then explain why every transfer occurred within days of conversations about divorce. He didn't answer. Daniel's face had turned pale. Judge Parker looked through the documents. Mrs. Carter, how did you obtain these records? I was a joint account holder. That answer silenced everyone. Then I produced something else. A copy of a company registration. Daniel had created a consulting company 4 months before filing for divorce. The company wasn't listed in his financial disclosure. Judge Parker's expression hardened. Mr. Carter, did you disclose this business? Yes. Marcus immediately answered. Your Honor, the company had no meaningful revenue. I shook my head. That isn't what the records show. I handed the clerk another document. Bank deposits, invoices, client payments, nearly $190,000 had passed through that company. Daniel stared at the pages as if they had appeared from nowhere. But there was one final document. I placed an email chain before the judge. Daniel had written to his accountant, "Move the money before Claire notices anything." The courtroom became completely still. Daniel's attorney read the line twice. His father lowered his head. His mother looked at me differently, not with pity, with fear. Judge Parker looked directly at Daniel. Did you write this email? Daniel said nothing. Mr. Carter? Yes. His voice was barely audible. I sat down. I had not finished, because the money wasn't the only thing Daniel had hidden. For months, he had told the court that I was unstable and incapable of caring for Emma. But I had records from Emma's school, teacher evaluations, attendance reports, medical appointment records, and something else Daniel had never expected me to have, a letter from Emma's pediatrician confirming that I had attended nearly every appointment during the past 5 years. Daniel's attorney had built his entire case around the idea that I was an absent mother. The evidence told a different story. Then Judge Parker asked the question that changed everything. Mrs. Carter, why did you remain silent about your professional background for so long? I looked at Daniel, then at his parents, and finally at my daughter sitting beside my mother in the gallery, because I was trying to keep my marriage together. Daniel looked down. I continued, but staying quiet doesn't make someone innocent. I closed the folder. It only gives them more time to believe they can lie without consequences. Judge Parker called for a recess. As everyone stood, Daniel rushed toward me. Claire, we can fix this. I looked at him. You had 11 years to fix it. He froze. Then I walked past him, because I knew the next hearing would be the one he feared most, the custody decision. When court resumed, Daniel's confidence was gone. His expensive attorneys sat beside him, whispering urgently. His father avoided looking at me. His mother kept staring at the floor. And Judge Parker sat silently behind the bench, reviewing the documents from the previous hearing. Then she looked at Daniel. Mr. Carter, before I issue my ruling, I have one question. Daniel stood. Yes, Your Honor. Why did you tell this court that your wife was incapable of managing financial and parental responsibilities when the evidence demonstrates otherwise? Daniel opened his mouth. Nothing came out. His attorney tried to answer for him. Your Honor, there were misunderstandings. Judge Parker stopped him. I asked Mr. Carter. Daniel swallowed. I was angry. The judge's expression remained firm. Anger does not explain hidden accounts. Daniel looked toward me. I thought she was going to take everything. I finally understood. He hadn't been afraid of losing his marriage. He had been afraid of losing control. Judge Parker continued. You transferred marital funds to relatives. You established an undisclosed company. You failed to disclose substantial income. And you presented incomplete information regarding your wife's role in your daughter's life. Daniel lowered his head. Yes, Your Honor. The courtroom became painfully quiet. Then the judge turned toward me. Mrs. Carter, I want to address your decision to represent yourself. I stood. Yes, Your Honor. You have demonstrated a strong understanding of financial documentation and courtroom procedure. I nodded, but I also want to make something clear. You should not have had to prove your worth by revealing your former career. Her words hit me harder than I expected. For years, I had allowed Daniel to convince me that my achievements made other people uncomfortable. So I had hidden them. I had stopped telling stories, stopped correcting people, stopped mentioning the cases I had worked on. I thought that was what keeping a family together looked like. Now I realized I had confused peace with silence. Judge Parker turned back toward Daniel. Primary physical custody will be awarded to Mrs. Carter. Daniel closed his eyes. The marital residence will remain with Mrs. Carter and the child, subject to the final property order. His mother gasped, and regarding the undisclosed funds and business interests, the court will require a complete accounting. Daniel's attorney leaned toward him. The judge continued, any funds improperly transferred from marital accounts will be considered in the final division of property. Daniel's shoulders dropped. Then came the sentence that mattered most to me. Mr. Carter will have structured parenting time with Emma, provided that he complies with all court orders. I looked toward my daughter. Emma was holding my mother's hand. When our eyes met, she smiled. For the first time in months, I could breathe. Outside the courtroom, Daniel's father approached me. He looked completely different from the confident man who had laughed when I arrived without a lawyer. Claire. I stopped. I owe you an apology. I said nothing. He continued. I thought you were just Daniel's wife. I never understood what you had done before him. I looked at him. You knew enough to know I deserved respect. He lowered his eyes. You're right. That apology didn't erase 11 years, but I accepted that he was finally telling the truth. A few weeks later, Daniel moved out. The house felt strange at first, too quiet. Then slowly it became peaceful. Emma began sleeping through the night again. We started having dinner at the kitchen table. No arguments, no whispered accusations, no one telling me to make myself smaller. One evening, Emma found an old box in the closet. Inside were my certificates, photographs, and an old identification card from the years I had spent working in legal investigations. She carried the box into the kitchen. Mom, why didn't I know you did all this? I smiled, because I forgot how important it was. She looked at one of the photographs. You look brave. I laughed softly. I was. Are you still brave? I looked at her. Yes. She smiled. Good. Then she climbed into my lap. That night, after Emma went to bed, I stood by the kitchen window. For 11 years, I had believed that staying quiet made me strong. It didn't. It only made me invisible. The courtroom had taught me something I would never forget. You don't have to shout to prove who you are. Sometimes you simply place the truth on the table and let everyone else discover how badly they underestimated you. Daniel had laughed because he thought I had no lawyer. The judge had asked who I was. And for the first time in years, I didn't hide. I was Claire Carter, a mother, a woman who had survived being underestimated, and someone who finally understood that her past was not something to be ashamed of. It was proof of everything she had already survived. And this time, I wasn't going to make myself smaller for anyone. The end.